Professor Sandy Simpkins, thanks for coming in today to spend a little time talking about your background and your research and advice for students that might consider our program. Great. So let's start with that particular research project with Deborah Vandell and Jackie Eccles that you're mentioning. This is the Templeton Foundation grant on looking at the relationship between after-school activities and character formation, right?
Right, and so it was recently funded by the John Templeton Foundation, and we're looking at using existing data that was already collected, and we're asking two main questions. One is, how does youth character change from about elementary school through age 26 in one of the data sets, so it's a very long age span. And by character, what I mean by that, we're looking at 5 main indicators. We have children's or youth's ability to just control themselves, their ability to regulate their emotions, which is an aspect of self-control. We're looking at their work habits at school. We're also looking at their pro-social behavior with peers and their cooperative behavior with peers. And so the first main question is to see how those 5 change over time, again, from elementary school to age 26. And then second, how does participating in organized after-school activities help with those characteristics or those behaviors? Because organized activities are places where youth gather on a systematic schedule once a week, every, Monday through Friday, it depends on the activities, and they're interacting with other peers. They have adult supervision. Many times they're working towards a collective project, and they experience times of great positive and negative emotion, right? When you think of a team sport, that there are times when the team wins, comes back and wins the game, and that's, a very happy time. And there are also times when they lose despite everything that they've done. And so we believe that organized activities are a setting where youth learn to work with peers in a cooperative way, a pro-social way, that they learn to be persistent and learn good work habits, and that they learn how to regulate their emotions. And so different activities afford various experiences, but that's partly what we're going to try and uncover.
Yeah, and I love the language of character formation. It's kind of old-fashioned. It's a throwback a little.
Right,
we often talk now about executive function and the like. Can you speak a little bit to the use of that term and why you think that's important in thinking about the work?
So you're right, and that when you look at even the literature and you search on any context and actually character, you don't find that many studies. But when you search for the specific aspects of it, like regulating one's emotions or having good work habits or being persistent, you actually find there's people working on these things. They just haven't called it character. And I think given, recent events in today's society, that people are more focused on character. And what we mean by character too, I should mention, because there are many different definitions, simply put, is being a good person. And so that has changed over time historically on what's considered a good person, and it can change or vary culturally. But yeah, I think talking about these things in terms of youth character also puts the focus on the child isn't just about academic achievement and test scores, that we also want people in society that are good people, that they're nice, good people. And honestly, there's been a large focus on after school and academic achievement. And I do think organized after school activities do help youth academically, but I think they really help youth in all these other aspects that sometimes schools focus on and sometimes they don't have time to focus on. And so it's a place where I do think after school activities can shine in terms of how they are influencing youth.
We often, or we used to talk about traditional elementary and secondary schools being focused on character formation, virtue, teaching virtues.
Right.
And now, as you said, it's often become very narrowly about standardized academic achievement in a set of academic domains. So would you make the case that particularly at this moment, these after-school activities is a place that become increasingly important for this area of human development?
I actually think for this area and for others. So say physical activity or music ability and talents, that oftentimes those, because of budget constraints and because of the pressure on schools for testing, have been pushed out of schools. They've been the things that if something has to go, oftentimes, unfortunately, it can be athletics and music or the arts just more generally. And so that is a place where after school can fill the gaps, but I would hate to pitch after school as just the purpose is to fill the gaps in school, because for after school to have its effect and to live to its potential, it's not an extension of school. Its purpose isn't to fill the gaps of school. But that said, I do believe, given the constraints that are being placed on schools, that it is a place where, in some cases, that's the only exposure some youth might have to, say, music or to the arts, or to have time to really consider a real world problem, to do something, to get together, to do something to help it, sometimes fail, which is a good thing, and then to come back, learn from that failure, and to try again. So for example, I know of someone, they were studying an adolescent program, and they got approval to create a mural in the city. And so the adolescents painted this mural. They spent a lot of time designing it and painting it and working on it. But the next morning, someone had come and already put graffiti on it. And it was extremely disappointing, as you can imagine, to the youth, but the leader used it as an opportunity to talk to the youth. Okay, this didn't work out quite as we had hoped. So what do you want to do? And so it's a place where also often in comparison to school, the leaders can follow the youth's lead and follow youth voice and see how it is that they want to tackle the problem. And that way youth get experience doing things that matter to them.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but the data suggests that after-school activities have increased overall in recent decades, right. After-school participation, but that there's lingering issues and a concern over equity in terms
right.
of access.
Right. So there has been funding both nationally and here in the state of California, for example, to fund after-school programs, particularly for low-income families or in low-income areas, which is very helpful. The problem with equity and access is there's a few issues with it. One, the funding is almost always sort of, you don't know if you're going to get it year to year or session to session when they're deciding this. Second, even if there is a program, there's still questions about the quality of those programs that youth have access to. In several of the studies I've done, families have said that they do have a program available to them, but it's not one they want to send their children to. The other problem with access is actually not having access to the program, but a lot of families worry about their child getting to and from the program. So for families living in low-income areas or areas that have, high rates of crime, the program may be great, but if they don't have any transportation home afterwards, then, and parents are working 2 jobs and can't walk their child, then that can be a concern. So there is still, I think there definitely are more programs, which is great. And I think now the challenge is consistent, reliable funding, improving quality, and then also considering some of these other access issues that you may not necessarily think of when you just want to put a program in a certain area.
And one of the things that's innovative about some of this work you're doing, the activities often involve volunteers, mentors right. that come in from the community, or right. often are undergraduate students from universities that go right. out into the community. And you're interested in not just about the effects on the youth that are being mentored and services are being provided for, right. but also the effects of these programs on the volunteers, the mentors themselves, right?
Right. And I don't know if you've ever led a program or worked at a program. I've had few opportunities along the way where I have, as an undergraduate and graduate student after, even as a Girl Scout leader for my daughters, and it's made a difference for me. It actually is part of the path on me choosing to actually study after school were experiences where I worked at after school programs when I was an undergraduate and a graduate student. And so I know from personal experience that these settings, after school activities, not only shape the youth, but have the potential to shape the adults who staff them. And so, yes, so right now we, in one of the programs here on campus, there's a program called Math CEO, and it's a collaboration. It was started by a professor in the mathematics department, and I started collaborating with her, and through there, we're looking at the impact of the program on the children who are middle school youth from Santa Ana, and then also from the undergraduates who staff it. And so during the program, they work on enriching math activities and real world math problems. And I know from just talking to the mentors from previous years, the undergraduate students, that some of them aren't sure about how to work with youth. They may know the math, but not how to work with youth. And other ones feel comfortable working with youth, but aren't sure how to explain the math, or maybe don't feel confident explaining the math. And by the end of a quarter or two, by working with these youth, the undergraduate students feel much more confident about explaining math and explaining it in multiple ways, working with youth. And they also at least the way they're describing it, they also have more long-term goals in terms of working with youth over the long run, volunteering. And so you can see changes in the undergraduates or the staff, on many different levels and what the activity is specifically on, and then these broader skills. And so it's great to see.
Yeah, it's very, very exciting, and particularly as you mentioned, at this historic moment where our country is polarized, and there are all these needs to go back in many ways to our the country's roots that de Tocqueville mentioned, of people coming together and volunteering in their community.
Right.
To provide services.
Yeah, and I think in some places and in some ways, sense of community gets lost. And so you can, because organized after school activities are flexible and malleable, more flexible than oftentimes schools can be, that it is a great way to build that sense of community. Because again, they come together, oftentimes, say with Math CEO, they come together once a week and they do math. And these undergraduate students are given an opportunity to do something that matters, to change a kid's life, not only in terms of learning a math skill, but they're teaching the youth to learn to become interested in math. And for many of these youth, they have not always had positive experiences around math. Not all of them are performing at grade level. And here they get to have successes in math, and to see math in a different way. And also, for some of them, it's their first time being on a college campus and first time learning about college. If they don't have family members who went to college, then that university undergraduate student is teaching them all kinds of stuff. And so it's a place where you can also empower the undergraduates, that they know a lot, and what they know matters, and it matters a great deal to youth. And so it's really sort of, when activities are done well, like in the case of Math CEO, it's really a win-win situation for both the youth and, in this case, for the undergraduate staff.
Yeah, and you mentioned kids being first in their family to attend college. They go to college to pursue these math interests, and so it brings up this other line of work I know you're involved with, and this builds on that prestigious NSF Career Award earlier in your professional development that was focused on STEM education and the role of families and parents in encouraging STEM interest and pursuits with youth. Can you speak a little bit to that line of work?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So in the National Science Foundation Career Award, I received funding to look at Latinx high school students and their families, and to understand what it was that families were doing to help support their youth in science and math during high school. And now Jackie Eccles and I receive funding from the National Science Foundation again, but to broaden it. And so my career award focused on Latinx youth and high school students. And now we're looking at Asian American youth, Latinx youth, Black youth, white youth in the United States, also high school students, to still ask the question about science and math motivation during high school, which unfortunately is a time when many students become less interested in STEM education. But it's also a time where parents can make a big difference. There were some researchers who did this experiment where they just gave families, they mailed them two pamphlets isn't the right word, booklets of information about STEM. How do their current science and math classes relate to other careers, and what are the careers that are out there in STEM? And just by doing that, and they also had a website, that they found increases in high school students, the number of courses they took, the majors they elected in college. And so a lot of people think all the science learning happens in school, and a lot does happen in school, but families make a big difference. They can sort of be what I consider a gatekeeper, that if you don't have your family behind you, it can be really hard to continue to pursue something. And so, but with that family support, it can make a big difference, and it can really help some of those youth also who experience challenges at school. That their youth always tell me in some of the interviews that their parents, even though they may not know much about science or math, that their parents are their rock, right? Parents are the ones that they always know will be there for them and make them feel better. And so some of the things and processes we found about families in Latinx, for Latinx youth, is now we want to test those things for other racial and ethnic groups to see what's going on. And this is, we're doing this with a very large national data set, and so we can also look at not only racial or ethnic differences, but also if the youth is a first-generation college student, to look at if they're a first-generation immigrant to the United States. So we can really look at what supports are helpful for which youth.
Yeah, and it sounds like you're exploring some of the same themes as the other project in terms of how do youth develop the capacity to handle setbacks, and
right.
Which often occur in these when one's pursuing difficult coursework, like often the STEM challenges.
Right, and some of the challenges are, certain youth unfortunately experience more challenges in school across the board, right? And then because this is focused on science, technology, engineering, mathematics, several students experience setbacks, in those fields specifically. And yeah, again, I think families can make a big difference in helping their youth overcome those challenges. Now, the challenge that families have and that parents have, the ones that I talk to, some of them didn't go to school in the U.S. Some of them didn't graduate high school or didn't go to college. And so their youth start taking courses that surpass their level of education. And so when I've talked with parents, some of them will say, oh, I don't take physics. They'll say, oh, I didn't take physics. I don't know how to help with this homework. So I'm not sure what I could do. And they're very frustrated with that. And there's actually many things parents can do without knowing anything about physics that, like I said, about kids have bad days at school. Kids fail tests. And having their parent help them make sense of that, having a parent help them feel better. Also, what parents do is when they realize they don't know how to help with this, they connect the child with other resources or people who can be helpful, like an older sibling or cousin, or making sure they go and talk to the teacher. And so there are many things parents can do even at home. They don't even have to walk on the school campus in order to help their child.
The psychological,
yes.
Socio-emotional support is equally, if not more important.
Right, and even just talking about the value of college, that and why it's important in different things. What's missing in STEM oftentimes is when I talk to youth and I say, do you want a job in science, technology, engineering, mathematics? And they say, no. Almost like, no way. And they say, okay, what kind of job do you want? And they say they want to design airplanes or video games. And so this connection in understanding what is STEM, they have a very, they think it's biology, chemistry, physics. And so they don't want one of those science jobs. And so there are these connections that would be helpful to make for youth and for families on all of what STEM includes. And it includes some very cool jobs that are out there. And it's the kind of jobs the youth want. And so, but they need to understand that if they want this type of job, this type of job is a STEM job. And then to get that job, these are the steps you have to go through, to get a college degree or a associate's degree, to be a tech. And then these are the type of high school courses that would be helpful to get that kind of degree. Because unfortunately what happens in high school is many high schools only require a certain number of years of science, not 4, say 2 or 3. And so once the student hits that, a lot of them drop out of science and stop taking science in high school. And then that, unfortunately, can close opportunities that they actually want later on. They just don't realize the easiest road to get there.
Well, thank you very much for taking the time to share those thoughts with us.
Yeah.
We're grateful for you coming in today.
Thanks for inviting me.